Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Andrew Harrell. I'm the Communications Manager with No Kid Hungry, North Carolina. And excited to be introducing a great panel today to talk about school meals. A little bit about us first. No Kid Hungry, North Carolina was started in NC in 2011 as part of Share Our Strength's National No Kid Hungry campaign. In 2014, we became a part of UNC Chapel Hill, where we also work with the Carolina Hunger Initiative on programs such as school meals. I've got our team members, Luann Crumpler, Helen Roberts, and Marlene Murata here with us. And our goal is to end childhood hunger. Woo. Right on. Our primary work to do this is done with school partners such as yourselves to increase access to and participation in federally assisted child nutrition programs such as school breakfast and school lunch. This work is done through grants, technical and marketing assistance, and innovative new programs and policies. We also work with community partners on the summer meals program, host nutrition education classes, and celebrate and advocate for nutrition professionals statewide. We all know kids can't learn if they're hungry. Meals are not just a health tool, but an academic tool. Today, our topic is some of the barriers that get in the way of that, such as cost, ease of access, paperwork, and stigma. So, after years of pandemic emergency rules that made school meals available for all students at no cost, many districts this school year have had to return to collecting forms for free meals eligibility and placing income limits on who can receive those meals. This is happening for the first time in 2 years, and in some cases, for the youngest families and students, for the first time ever, they're experiencing this. To discuss the impact of these challenges, as well as some examples of success with school meals happening in our state, we have a great panel today. They represent 4 different types of perspectives from the district and the school level. Starting off, we have Brian Link, a teacher from East Chapel Hill High School. He's also the 2022, I believe, North Central Region Teacher of the Year.
Of the year!
Antonio Covington is with us. He's the principal from East Hoke Middle School. And he's also the 2022 Sandhills Region Principal.
Of the year!
That's right. Dr. Rob Jackson is with us, and I understand he's currently in between jobs right now.
Of the year!
Dr. Rob Jackson has been superintendent of Carteret County Schools, and on Monday will begin as superintendent in his home county of Buncombe County Schools. And finally, we've got Amy Stanley with us, the school nutrition director from New Hanover County Schools. She's what we describe as a No Kid Hungry champion. We first met her when she was working in Bladen County Schools as the nutrition director, where she worked with the school board and Rob Taylor, who many of you know, to make innovative breakfast policies the standard in every school to increase participation and access to those meals for all students.
Yes.
And she's currently, as I said, located in New Hanover County Schools. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy to start our conversation off and moderate for the day. So thank you again for being here, and thanks to this panel. I want to use this.
Okay, thank you. So I heard a sobering little bit of information. How much what could you do with $1.3 million in the school districts? We could do a lot, right? But as of today, that's what the districts are going to have to pay for student meal debt. Today's October 28th. We've got a long time till the end of school year. So what we want to talk about is how the student meal debt and how child nutrition affects the school, the child as a whole. Coming from Bladen County, a very rural county, 100% CEP, I cannot tell you the last time I had to worry about meal debt. I think we were one of the first schools, 13, 14, that went to CEP. Come to New Hanover County, I've been there a year, and This year, we've had to start the application process. We've had to start trying to collect meal debt, and in New Hanover, as of probably today, because I haven't pulled the numbers today, we're at $50,000. That's a lot of money, and that is what is keeping me up at night for many different reasons. The applications, man, I forgot how much time they took up in my day, and I forgot how upset parents could get. And then your heart goes home at night with you when you had to tell a family that they don't qualify, that they missed the mark by $100. Or you're in a verification process and the family put their net and I have to put their gross, and it changes them from a free to a reduced. Those are things that are staggering. We need some changes, we need some help, and I keep thinking, we stigmatize the students, but I don't know about your districts, but child nutrition as a whole carries the stigma, because we're coming to the teachers and we're asking you to help us collect meal debt, or we're asking for meal applications, or we're saying a kid can't do this or a kid can't do that, we have to follow these rules. So it's not just the child that takes the stigma, it's child nutrition as a whole. And we're not here but to do anything to enhance your classrooms. We're trying to make sure that the kids are fed and that they are ready to learn. And we have barriers, and the application process is a huge, huge barrier. The families now don't understand how they've been no cost for 2 years, and to explain that to families, I cannot even tell you how many people that they just don't understand. Or you've got this kid that's now in the 2nd grade, they've never had to go through this application process. CEP, unless some things change in New Hanover County and a lot of the coastal counties, Hurricane Florence, with all the bad, brought a lot of good when it comes to CEP, because you've got districts that are 100% CEP because of that. That's going away at the end of this year. So where we hear 1.3 million as what is student debt now, next year that number could be just out of this world, because you're going to lose these CEP schools. I have a friend in a neighboring county, 20 of their schools right now are CEP. By numbers we are seeing now, 2 will be after this school year.
And could I ask you to kind of explain CEP first?
I'm sorry, community eligibility. So community eligibility districts, we can look at the kids that are direct certified, that are receiving SNAP, TANF. It also includes your homeless, migrant, runaways, those types of students. We can take those numbers and certify our district to where we don't have to do the application process. All students eat at no cost, and the stigma goes away. You can be one school in a district, or you can be a whole, as a whole. In Bladen, we were 100% Dr. Taylor. When we were looking at it, it was all or none, and we went for the all. In New Hanover, we have 46 schools, 28 of them are on CEP. That will not be the case next year. But this affects so many different people. And now with the application, I was telling Helen earlier, how many kids are hungry that we don't know about because their moms have threatened them, you better not go through that lunch line, and rack up a bill. I have kids with over a $200 balance. We also have kids now going to the transportation site where they'll go to one school and then transport over to their regular school. They're trying to eat meals at both. That tells you they're hungry. So if we can do away with the stigma of applications in general, it is going to help the district as a whole. You're going to see less times to the nurse's office. You're going to be able to see test scores increase because they're fed, and they don't have to worry about going to mom with a bill from me saying I owe $200. So I told them, I don't know, this has been a challenging few weeks. you know, because we are dealing with the student meal debt, and it keeps me up because I do not want to go to my finance officer at the end of the year and say, you owe me $180,000-$200,000, because I know that that's taking resources away from the classroom. And that is, it is hard, and we're fighting the staff shortage and all of that too, so it's just, this has been a storm all by itself this year. We thought it would be better. It has been a storm this year, just seeing the need, because like I said, I mean, when you miss a mark by $100, to mean I've got to pay the $3.50, and I think we may be about average for a lunch at $3.50. And you think about that for 180 student days and a parent that can't pay it and then get a bill at the end of the year. Well, we give ours weekly, but, you know, well, we hand them to the teachers weekly, but how many of them get to the homes, and then it's a shock at graduation time. I could go on and on and on. We have so many different stories, but I don't want to let these guys miss out as well. So currently, Dr. Jackson, you are in a majority CEP school. What can you add about this on a district level, and how can people in this room, with people like school boards, help, and what can we do to lobby to gain knowledge of this?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First, if I might, I want to say thank you to No Kid Hungry, to the work that the organization has done for years, recognizing the incredible need of our children to be well fed. Food is ultimately the most important school supply for our students pre-K through 12th grade. When we think about school supply drives, we tend to think about pencils and pens and notebooks and all the things that folks will gather. We don't think very much about food. And you see, when we think about, for our educators, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, on the very bottom, foundationally, are those physiological needs, the need to be well fed, to have water, to have rest, and to have warmth. And we find that in our cafeterias across the state. And so I want to thank No Kid Hungry for championing this work, for understanding the absolute crucial and critical need for our children to be well fed if we are to move the needle and help them prepare for bright and successful futures. I also want to thank the Of the Years. We appreciate our State Teacher of the Year, Leah, and the Regional Teachers of the Year, Regional Principals of the Year, as a past Principal of the Year for the state. I really do appreciate that group working with No Kid Hungry for years and really adding their voice and elevating the message across the state of how important it is for our children to be well fed. And so welcome to all of you, and to my new colleagues from Buncombe County. Thank you so much for being here. I see you texting everybody back home going, okay, let's tell you about this guy. So I will say that I've had the incredible honor and blessing of serving as a superintendent in the Edenton-Chowan school system in northeastern North Carolina. What a wonderful place. When CEP, the community eligibility provision, was first kind of coming out, we looked at it, and Edenton just missed the mark. And so for Edenton to be a CEP district where all children might receive a free meal would have cost the district at that point over $150,000. In a small rural district, that just wasn't, we couldn't do that. And so we weren't able to take advantage of that. We had to be very creative, particularly when some of the rules changed. For those who may not be very close to the work, when we talk about meal debt, that is huge from the standpoint of, there was a time when child nutrition might have been able to just write off meal debt, or perhaps out of funds within child nutrition be able to satisfy meal debt. But that changed. So the responsibility for meal debt is the school system. So when we talk about $1.3 million across the state, we're talking about $1.3 million across the state that can't be spent on library books, and can't be spent on software, and can't be spent on teacher salaries, or bringing in more counselors or school social workers. And that's a sad state of affairs when we have to choose and figure out, like Solomon's choice, what do we go for, because so much of it is very important. In Buncombe County, our child nutrition director shared with me that as of today, in Buncombe County schools, the meal debt is $74,000. $74,000, that's a teacher. I can think of a couple of schools already in Buncombe County where we would do well to add a teacher to a school as we think about the importance of class size. And so just from a financial standpoint, thinking about the impact on our school system and the academic impact on our students, it's certainly something we have to consider. I currently serve on the Crystal Coast of North Carolina and the southern Outer Banks for about 3 more days. It is an absolutely beautiful place that was ravaged by Hurricane Florence. And because of that, many people lost their homes, and here it is 4 years later, and there are folks who still have tarps on top of their houses because they've not been able to replace the roof of their house that was torn off in a hurricane 4 years ago. And we're in hurricane season, by the way, knock on wood, we hope that doesn't come again this year. In that community, because of the hurricane, they became a CEP district, and so families had that pressure, the financial pressure of providing meals for their children, breakfast and lunch, taken off. But this year, that has gone away for our high school students. Our elementary and middle school students still have 1 more year of that provision. And so in Carteret County, we've seen the difference in our school system for schools that we are still receiving free meals for all of our students, or student meals for all, and our high schools where we don't. High schools are particularly problematic because children don't want to turn in paperwork. They don't want to apply for free or reduced lunches, no matter what we do to try to minimize the opportunity for another student to know who's receiving a free or reduced meal. Still, our high school students are reticent to come forward and say, I need help, because they have great pride, and they should. And so that has been something that we've seen in terms of our meal participation dropping. In Buncombe County, where that's been completely removed, we've seen huge drops, almost 7% in participation rates of students who are eating and taking advantage of school meals. And so what that means is that they're going throughout the day hungry. They're arriving at school hungry, and they're leaving hungry because their parents are having to make decisions between, are we going to have lights and heat this winter, or are we going to send money for our child to eat? And so that piece really hurts as I think about it, because educators, regardless of the work we do, we're in this business because we love children. And when I think about hungry children, that tears me apart. And I begin to have decided within myself, as you have, we've got to do something about it. And so you asked me this great question about, well, what can we do about it? One, we have to tell our story. We have to do a good job sharing the need. We have to make the case that food is the most important school supply. And with folks who haven't thought about that, aren't quite sure what we mean, we have to eloquently share with them how important it is that our children are well fed if we want them to do well in school. We have to stand in front of those who are making decisions and advocate for them to add their voices. And so among the superintendents, we have to do a good job talking to our local boards of education so that they in turn can talk to our state legislators and those who work at the national level to describe the issue and help them understand the ramifications, like what does meal debt really mean to each of our schools, and what could we do if we were relieved of that meal debt, and more importantly, how many more children would actually be well fed and prepared to be successful throughout the school day. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the response.
Thank you, yes, thank you. And I go back to my days in Bladen where things were just very different because it was a rural community, and you did have those kids that did not eat, and breakfast in the classroom was huge for us there because we knew that the kids might not eat everything that we gave them, but we knew that they had siblings at home that needed that, because you've got an 8-year-old taking care of younger siblings, And so they're trying to take meals back home. So breakfast in the classroom, our regular breakfast, the lunch is also critical to your day in the classroom. Now, Antonio, you are in the county with one of my real good friends, Deborah Carpenter, and y'all are a full CEP district, which means you've had no-cost meals before the pandemic and are continuing. Can you tell us the impact that this has had on your schools and the district?
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for coming to the session. And I'll actually go back a little further. This conversation resonates with me in a different way. I was one of those students. I'm actually from a rural area in North Carolina, Union County. I'm from Wingate, North Carolina. I grew up back when it was still called Wingate College. I grew up right behind that school. But I do, resonate with the story of the barrier to getting the application done. When you're looking at students of poverty, I think my 8th grade, I figured out how to fill it out myself. And had I not did that, my mom, she, working double jobs, multiple jobs, not home in the afternoon, having younger siblings. Had I not learned how to fill it out, where it could be something where I could say, hey mom, sign here, I'm gonna turn it in. Once we made it to that point, I was able to fill it out for me and my siblings, because you put the siblings on there. Had I not done that, then we'd be worried about what I'm gonna eat, what my younger siblings are gonna eat, and how we're gonna survive until mom gets off work and because grandma's watching us until she gets off. So this conversation resonates with me in a whole nother level. But to your question, yes, in Hoke County we've been CEP before the pandemic, and I've been a principal of 2 different locations since then. So it does help out when students are not hungry. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. We know that. And we did some very creative things as the leaders in the district, along with breakfast in the classroom. We did programs like Second Chance Breakfast. Second Chance Breakfast was huge for my high schoolers. I was at the alternative school, and of course what kind of comes with that territory. But being able to give a little flexibility and be creative as a leader to say, hey, and even in a rural county, the bus situation. So when we get to school late, breakfast is already over, and students are concerned about that. Students that haven't eaten since the last lunch at school, it's very demanding on their bodies. Even athletes, it's demanding on their bodies, and they're still trying to go compete and participate in different athletics, and some of them are caregivers for their younger siblings. So, the Second Chance Breakfast was a awesome thing that we put in place where students could have another opportunity to go back to grab breakfast after first period. Once they get there, past that cutoff, we had made those things available, and that's really kind of the flexibility of how we use our breakfast in the classroom at my school now, is that once we do our breakfast in the classroom, students still have that availability to grab those meals at no charge. I know Deborah Carpenter, she's always making sure the principals reiterate that. Someone's paying for these meals. We talk about the debt, someone's paying for these meals, and it's very important that we know that, the funding that we get, it comes, at a cost to someone. And even though those students don't have to pay, that's something that we, keep at the forefront of our minds. We've been fortunate at our school, my school. We're actually one of the borderline schools. Hoke County is a rural county, and we are 100% CEP for the county. But my school is one of those we have to watch it. We have to really watch. Mine is a little closer to Fayetteville. I have a very transient population of military families and kids that come in and out. And the students that, had we used applications, could possibly determine how other students have the availability for food. So that's a critical conversation I share with my parents every single year. Within those first, 10 days of school, when we have our Title I parent nights, these are the conversations I share with my parents. Because I would get a lot of calls about parents saying, hey, your teachers are making my child eat. We don't want that, we don't want to go through the line. We can afford it. And I have very serious conversations with parents that because you can afford it, it does not mean all of our students can afford it. Your child going through grabbing 2 or 3 items at lunch or whatever whatever qualifies as a meal, and I know we kind of look at that very creatively every now and then as well. But what makes it a meal, your child grabbing those items can allow another child to eat that furthermore probably wouldn't eat if we didn't have this program set up. So yes, we've had that conversation in our district because we do have a couple of schools that are borderline, that if we aren't, participating and having students to eat and encouraging, those teachers to say, encourage those students, go through the line. Hey, young man, go get something. Go get the fruit. The kids love the fruit. Go get the fruit. And as they go through there, it does help another student. So that's something amazing. And in Hoke County, we've been doing that for a while, but it is getting closer because I know we've had those serious conversations about some of our borderline schools and making sure we're meeting our participation cutoffs.
And with CEP, just listening, as a whole district, when you have a district that's 100%, that is great. But when you're in a district like me right now, where 28 are and the rest are not, I may have a family that this child is CEP, but this child goes to another school and is not. And that is a hard conversation because the needs are the same. One is just CEP, so, we still have to have this application. It's very burdensome. And now, Brian, you are a social justice teacher and regional teacher of the year cohort. Can you tell us more about that and what you are seeing?
Well, thank you for the question. Thank you to No Kid Hungry for having all the panelists here. It's an honor and a privilege to be on this same platform as all of you. Thank you for everyone in attendance. And as long as I'm doing thank yous here, and I want to connect this to the question that you just did, I want to thank my fellow teammates who are here with me today. And as perhaps if you've been here for the conference the last couple of days, one of the things that we've been talking about is this idea of NC story. And so I want to start with publicly asking the wonderful stories that folks have just shared to be able to come and to tell that so that we can get these stories out, right? Because that's part of the piece. It's not just keeping this to ourselves, but to get it to folks across the state, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take folks from the mountains to the sea to help create that transformational change in our vision and understanding of what an important issue this is in order to make a difference in the lives of our kids. Because that's what it's about. It's about our kids. So I would absolutely encourage you to share those stories. No Kid Hungry is doing recordings as well to make sure that they can do that. And storytelling, as we learned from our amazing keynote speaker, right, is the way we move people. So I'd like to, with my limited time here, tell 3 stories. And the first story is how I was first introduced to this issue. So I think it's important, right? This is, to me, when we think about why we're here at this conference, right? We're here to learn about, the best practices in the classroom. We're here to learn about the new and innovative ways to run our district. We're here to think about all those buzzwords in education, right? The whole child, social emotional learning, right? The bedrock of equity. This is where it starts. This is the equity issue in our state. Because when we think about equity, how do we take the implicit and make it explicit? And as a classroom teacher, when you think about starting your year, you hope that the kids are going to show up on the first day. And what we've seen, right, is that we had kids wanting eagerly to come to school in the aftermath of the pandemic, not only for that connection, but they knew that if they showed up, there was a meal waiting for them. No questions asked, no separate line, no stigma. It was there and available for all. And when you don't have that, our kids aren't showing up. And we wonder, how do we deal with attendance issues, right? It starts with providing reasons for kids to come to schools, and a meal is a basic concept to be able to do that. We talk about meeting and creating relationships with your kids. Think about all those sort of starters, those first week activities, the questions that you ask them. The question that you aren't asking them, or certainly as you're beginning a relationship, right, that you might be scared or afraid to ask them, is what's going on at home? Are you getting meals? Are you able to provide, right, all the energy? Think of the caloric burn that it takes, right, to learn. Learning is hard. It requires a lot of energy. And we'll ask about all sorts of other stuff, but we won't ask about this basic question, which is so critical for understanding everything that comes after that. The most exciting day of the year for me as a high school teacher is graduation day. Seeing what kids have put in not only in the 4 years that they've been in high school, but all of the learning that's gone up, all the supports, right, that have come from extended families to get to that point. The excitement that families have bringing in folks from right around the city, around the state, around the country. It's a day of celebration. And what no one asks is, why was that chair empty? Why did that family not come today? Because they weren't allowed to walk for nothing more than unpaid debts for something that that child had no control over. That to me is crazy. But it's our lived experience. And so I came to this issue, and I think it's important to acknowledge my privilege growing up. I didn't have to worry about, in a loving family, about where my next meal was coming from. But we've already heard about the experiences of hurricanes here in the state of North Carolina. We know what Ian did not only to our communities, right, but to the communities of South Florida. I grew up in the state of Florida. The largest natural disaster in the history of America at the time when I was in middle school was Hurricane Andrew. I lived through that. We were fortunate, right? We had a lot of damage, but our family was intact, our home was mostly intact, and I was able to go back to school after a couple of weeks. My mom, an amazing woman, was a principal of a school in Homestead, which is where the eye hit. Flattened. Just imagine piles of wood as far as the eye can see. Everything that families hold most dear, gone. And if you know, in education, right, you don't get to stop, you don't get to pause. As a principal, right, as a superintendent, we gotta figure out how to keep going. The call comes and it's like, how are we gonna hold school? Where are we gonna hold school? What are we gonna do? And the first thing that was happening was to have our school, right, because schools are the hubs of our communities, to how are we gonna help start getting people back up on our feet? And it was literally passing out the basic needs of supplies, right, bottles of water, food, etc. Community rallied together to provide that. There was a common understanding, this is what you do as human beings to help one another. And although it was hot and muggy, it's burned in my mind, right, of just listening to the stories of people of one day everything was fine and the next day, nothing. And that's how quickly it can change. As a civic literacy teacher, people don't understand, right, the concepts of poverty, right? It's something that happens to other people. But statistically speaking, over the course of a lifetime, it is more likely than not that the majority of people in the United States for at least 1 year in their lives will live in poverty. At some point. This is not an issue that affects some, right? It is an issue that affects lots, if not all, not directly, indirectly. But we also know that it's an issue that doesn't affect everyone equally. We understand as matters of equity, right? It affects individuals and families disproportionately. And so the second thing that I want to share with you today, thinking about thank yous, another amazing woman, my wife. I'm here this morning because she's able to juggle her own job, but also to get my 7-year-old daughter, the apple of my eye, to school. There was a lot that she probably had to worry about this morning because it's Spirit Week. Today was dress up as your favorite book character. My daughter is doing Room on a Broom, so she's the witch, right? I think she wanted to figure out a way to get her lovies into school. So, so my wife had to have the stress of how do I get a broom and get the lovies to stay up there and not have her crying. But what she didn't have to worry about this morning was breakfast. Because even though I'm a teacher in the Chapel Hill Cargo City schools, we can't afford to live there. We live in Durham, and we're big believers in sending your kids to the local public schools. And so in Durham County, there's free breakfast for all kids. Speaking of innovative practice, yes, we should applaud that. And elementary kids don't know, right? They see the world differently. They're just excited to be like, is my teacher going to be there? What am I learning? What's the specials today? I can't wait to talk to my friends at recess. Right? They don't have to understand or imagine a world of what is it like to not be able to eat at school, because that's what they've experienced. She's now in second grade. You were talking about, right, the kids are experiencing this for the first time. She hasn't had to experience that because that's what the schools have done with support, and they're still able to do now there. And yet in Chapel Hill Cargo, which looks like to say, oh, they're the wealthy district, they have all of it. Again, right, it's good digging deeper into the stories. Talked about percentages, right? We're over a third of students who are qualifying for free and reduced lunch, and we have many more who, again, because of the hardships, the stigmas, who won't fill it out. We should have more than that. And yet we don't do this basic service that's happening right in the county next door. And so that leads me to my third story, which is this idea of what are we going to do next? Advocacy. How do we change minds? And it starts with hearts, right? We've heard lots of statistics, and I could sit here and tell you today, right, that it would take less than 0.3% of our budget in North Carolina to make it happen. I could tell you that California and Maine, coast to coast, literally states have already said, right, we experience something different, we need to think and act differently after the pandemic, we're going to marshal up and provide our resources so that that never has to be an issue or concern again. We could go on, but the question is that how are we going to move people individually, in groups, in communities, and ultimately across the state to literally change and transform lives? And as a civic literacy teacher and as a director of our Social Justice Academy, right, this is a social justice issue of our times. And it starts with conversations and it starts with stories. Because as I look out in the room, right, folks like Lynn Harvey, who has to go before our most august bodies, right, and stand before them and say, what's the case, make the case. She can't do it alone. She needs the support of all of us. Because at the end of the day, in a representative democracy, our politicians are going to be moved by what they're hearing in our communities. And the great thing is, this is not an issue that's red or blue or purple. It's about feeding kids. And if we can, as a society, say, oh yeah, revenge travels back, let's get out, let's get on planes, right? But they're not there. And so people are delayed. But we can require folks to have to provide foods if they're delayed 2 hours. Why can't we make the case that says we require our kids every single day to come for 8 hours, and yet we're not going to provide them 2 meals? We had a mind shift that we're all still coming from, and perhaps people want to say and forget that, but let's use that to our advantage. When the pandemic hit, we figured out ways in our community alone to serve over 1 million meals to folks. Not just to the kids, but to their families, to do it over breaks, etc. Let's learn what we've used to be able to say, yeah, let's not go back to what was before, but let's take that knowledge and make it a piece going further. And at the end of the day, it's a really simple question that you can start any conversation with. Do you think it is morally right for a child to eat and to be well fed? And if the answer to that is yes, then it shouldn't matter whether they're at home, on a plane, or in our schools. That's what we need to happen. And if we do that, all the other stuff, attendance, behavior, social emotional learning, right, academic excellence, this is the building block that leads to all those other successes that we want to have. So thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk with you guys today, and I believe